On October 21, 2025, in Fort Lauderdale, a groundskeeper marked out the lines at Chase Stadium ahead of Inter Miami's final regular season match. Lionel Messi, 38 years old, laced his boots in a locker room he had occupied for 3 seasons. Across the world, in Riyadh, Cristiano Ronaldo, 41, stepped onto a training pitch under lights that had replaced the ones at Old Trafford and the Bernabeu. Neither man needed the game anymore. Both men still needed the game. The story that connects these two rooms started 20 years earlier, on opposite ends of a continent. Ronaldo signed his first professional contract at Sporting Lisbon, then moved to Manchester United in 2003, a transfer that made him the most expensive teenager in English football history at the time. Messi, 4 years younger, was already training with Barcelona's youth academy, a boy so small that doctors had diagnosed a growth hormone deficiency the club agreed to pay for. One arrived with power and flair built for English defenses. The other arrived with a low center of gravity that made him almost impossible to tackle cleanly. Neither knew the other's name would define the next 2 decades of the sport. By 2008, Ronaldo won his first Ballon d'Or, the season he scored 42 goals for Manchester United and lifted the Champions League. Messi was still considered the heir to Diego Maradona, a brilliant supporting piece rather than the finished article. Then, in 2009, Ronaldo moved to Real Madrid for a world record fee, and Messi, that same year, won his own first Ballon d'Or as the best player on a Barcelona team many still call the greatest club side ever assembled. From that point on, for 9 straight seasons, the two men occupied Spanish football at the same time, on rival clubs, in a fixture that stopped being just a derby and became something closer to a running argument the entire sport was forced to have twice a year. They would face each other 36 times across those years. Messi's Barcelona won 16 of those meetings. Ronaldo's Madrid won 11. 9 ended in draws. Between them, they scored 43 goals in those matches. Messi with 22, Ronaldo with 21. A margin so thin it barely counts as a margin at all. What nobody could measure was the effect they had on each other. In 2011 and 2012, Ronaldo scored 60 goals in a single La Liga season, a record that stood until Messi broke it the following year. In 2012, Messi scored 91 goals in the calendar year for club and country combined, a number that remains unmatched by any player before or since. Every time one of them raised the bar, the other treated it as a personal insult. By the mid-2010s, the debate had moved beyond Spain. Ronaldo left Madrid for Juventus in 2018, chasing new records in Italy, and later signed with Al-Nassr in Saudi Arabia in a deal that reshaped how the world thought about a footballer's twilight years. Messi's path ran differently. He stayed loyal to Barcelona until the club's finances forced a tearful goodbye in 2021, moved to Paris Saint-Germain, and then, in 2023, arrived in Major League Soccer at Inter Miami, a club that had finished last in its conference the year before he signed. What nobody expected was how much both men still had left. Ronaldo, at an age when most strikers have retired, kept scoring for club and country at a rate that defied every assumption about aging athletes. Messi, at Inter Miami, won the 2023 Leagues Cup within weeks of arriving, and by 2025 had captained the club to its first ever MLS Supporters' Shield and League Championship, a trophy the franchise had never come close to before he walked through the door. Internationally, their stories diverged even more sharply. Ronaldo led Portugal to Euro 2016, the nation's first ever major trophy, playing through a knee injury that forced him off in the final before Portugal won it without him in extra time. He added the UEFA Nations League title in 2019, then again in 2025, and by early 2026 stood as international football's all-time leading goal scorer, a men's record that experts consider unlikely to ever be broken. But one trophy stayed out of reach. Despite 5 World Cup appearances with Portugal, Ronaldo never lifted the tournament that defines a football career more than any other. Messi's road to that same trophy was longer and for years more painful. He lost the 2014 World Cup final to Germany, a defeat that followed him for nearly a decade. He won the Copa America with Argentina in 2021, finally silencing critics who said he could not deliver for his country. Then, in Qatar in 2022, at his 5th and presumably final World Cup, Messi captained Argentina to the title, scoring twice in an extraordinary final against France before converting his penalty in the shootout at Lusail Stadium. He was named the tournament's best player. It was the one line on Ronaldo's resume that had always stayed blank, and for many, it was the moment the debate over who stood above the other quietly tilted. By 2026, the numbers themselves had become a kind of countdown. Ronaldo entered the year closing in on 1,000 career goals for club and country, a milestone no player in the modern era had ever approached, chasing it deep into his 40s as what commentators began calling a system finisher, a player who had reshaped his entire game around movement, positioning, and the art of arriving in exactly the right place at exactly the right moment. Messi, meanwhile, had shifted into a different role entirely, prioritizing a 6th World Cup appearance and the architecture of Argentina's attack over his own scoring column. Still capable of a hat trick, as he showed in Argentina's opening match of the 2026 World Cup against Algeria, but now measuring his value in assists as much as goals. Off the numbers, the two men could not have been built more differently. Ronaldo wears every emotion on his shirt sleeve, visibly furious after a missed chance, visibly in tears after a trophy. A player who has never hidden how badly he wants to win. Messi has spent 2 decades doing the opposite, delivering some of the greatest performances in the sport's history with an expression that barely changes, letting the football speak in a language that needed no translation. One built a brand on intensity, the other built a legend on stillness. Between them, by 2026, they held 8 Ballon d'Ors for Ronaldo's rival and 5 for Ronaldo himself. 46 major team trophies for Messi against 34 for Ronaldo, and international goal-scoring records that will likely stand for generations. Analysts who once spent hours arguing over spreadsheets began admitting something simpler. The comparison was never really a mirror. Ronaldo built the most relentless goal-scoring machine the game has ever produced. Messi built something closer to a language, a way of playing that a generation of players spent years trying and failing to copy. Neither one needed to defeat the other to prove it. They simply needed to keep showing up, year after year, long after the rest of their generation had gone quiet. what made 2026 different was not another head-to-head meeting. Their clubs had drifted continents apart. Ronaldo's fixtures broadcast from Saudi Arabia, Messi's from Florida, and the days of facing off twice a season in Spain were a memory neither man could get back. What made it different was the calendar itself. Both men arrived at the same World Cup, on the same stage, at ages no elite footballer had ever reached that tournament at before. Two players from the same generation, born 14 months apart, still competing at the summit of a sport that is supposed to have no room left for anyone over 35. Neither has said out loud when the end will come. Ronaldo has spoken of playing into his mid-40s if his body allows it. Messi has been vaguer, careful, the way he has always been about his own plans, saying only that he will know when it is time. What both have made clear in different ways is that neither wants to be the one who stops first. 2 decades after a teenager left Lisbon for Manchester and a boy left Rosario for Barcelona, the era that carries both their names still has not agreed to end on anyone's schedule but their own.